Alrighty, we are rolling. Looks like we got a ton of folks coming in. Fantastic. Good to see everybody here. Um, just a couple of quick announcements before we get started today. Typically, I'd spend a lot of time talking about Explore on Tour, as that's been going on since we were out of Las Vegas. But you know what? We've got one left, and that's Frankfurt coming up next week already, isn't it? So it's absolutely sold out. Thanks to everybody for the support in these events. They've been fantastic. We will be bringing them back next year. There will be some on-demand content on those available, so be sure to check up on those if you were not able to attend live. Tokyo was a resounding success, a lot of good stuff going on there, and we're definitely keeping our eyes on a lot of the certification that's available with your tickets to these events. So great chance to show up live and see a lot of really strong content, as well as for those of you who are interested in certification, which I strongly recommend, an opportunity to do so sort of on our dime, which is fantastic. Talking about what's coming up, we're getting near the end of the year. We've actually got a few more webinars scheduled this month. Going to have a couple more in December. A little bird told me, in fact, we're going to have some pretty big name guests coming in January. So watch closely on that. So next week, sort of the low hanging fruit here, we're going to have elevated cyber compliance for VMware Cloud Foundation. We're going to have a lot of our superstars coming back from that. I know Jay's coming back. We talked to him last week. Sejong's coming back. He's always fantastic. But today, speaking of superstars, we've got a couple of legends from our professional services organization here today. We've got Jonathan McDonald, aka the JMac, and Brent Douglas here with us. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good,
Good, good.
good.
And
Yep.
we're doing the biggie today. How to upgrade VCF 5.2 to 9.0. And I know there's a lot of curiosity about that. We made a lot of announcements of some of the reasons why somebody would want to do that at our Explore Las Vegas. Um, Plenty of good reasons to. So let's talk about the how-tos. So with that, I want to get into it here. So take it away.
Yeah. Thanks, Anders.
Mhm.
So let's jump right into it. And so my name's Jonathan McDonald, and so I'm a master architect on our portfolio services engineering team. And so myself and my co-host Brent, we're both on the same team, and we are focusing on developing the different offers and whatnot that VMware Professional Services brings to market. And so Brent is going to be my moderator today, and so he will jump in with questions that we see and whatnot. But as we are jumping into it, let's dig right in. And so this is our agenda for today. And so, as I always like to do, I always have an overview and architecture, sort of changes section in, my decks. And then we're going to jump right into, in this session, upgrading to VMware Cloud Foundation 9. So this is from a 5.2 environment, but we're going to basically talk about, how do you choose a path? Like, what are the considerations that you need to know for that? And then we're going to walk through each of the steps with ample demos. So I've got, like my previous sessions, I've got the full video of how I upgraded my own environments from 5.2 to 9, and then in the future we're also going to do one for converging as well, because converging obviously is something that's changed in VCF 9 as well. So let's jump into the sort of platform slide. And so this is something where we just want to level set about sort of that fundamental shift, of how we've approached, the design and deployment of environments. And so with VCF 9, we have really taken and converged it into that unified VCF platform. And so I know you've probably heard that many a time from from the VMworld sessions or VMware on tour, that sort of thing. But we really want to highlight the fact that it deploys not only regular VM workloads, but also the container-based Kubernetes constructs, and all from within this really easy to deploy platform that we're all sort of getting more and more used to as time goes on. So from that perspective, really what we have, for VCF, and this is where my team focuses predominantly, is in what are the different use cases that we have for VMware Cloud Foundation. And with 9, they've changed sort of slightly, but they're kind of the same underlying sort of features and functions. And so we have everything from infrastructure modernization to application modernization to security modernization. You're really going into how do I deploy, how do I optimize and configure, how do I extend my cloud, you all the way into the new constructs such as private AI, Kubernetes and modern workloads, self-service infrastructure with automation, and right into the biggest thing that that most people are concerned with is the whole security level. And so you strengthening your compliance, strengthening your lateral security, your ransomware, recovery, that sort of stuff. And so these are the things that my team has offers that we develop for professional services to be able to get up and running in any one of these areas very, very much more quickly than just doing it by themselves. So we have a common starting point, and we know what's good, and we build that into a validated sort of architecture and starting point for people to use. So I don't want to dive into all of these ones, but R1 really falls into the build and deploy private cloud. Obviously, I mean it's a an upgrade session, but again, like I said, we have stuff for each of these different sections. So before we jump further into some of the configurations, we wanted to bring up our first poll, and so the poll is on the screen. And so Anders, if you can start that poll. I mean, effectively, we want to know have you yet upgraded VCF 9 or not? So that's well, we'll give a few seconds here. Brent, any thoughts? Any questions have come in, anything like that?
What's been your experience with upgrading your environments from 5.2.9? Has it been relatively painless? I know you're going to address some concerns throughout, but general thoughts about the overall process.
I mean, if you're used to the 5.x environment, it's definitely something that is very much, in my opinion, painless. I mean, there's always going to be some issues. So there's some gotchas that we'll talk about throughout the session, that sort of thing. But effectively, yeah, I mean, it's not a whole lot different, and we've made a tremendous level of progress to to make it as easy as as possible. So it's definitely something that you have appreciated the changes, the VCF installer and whatnot. You have gotten way better, throughout the time with VCF that we've had.
All right, we got about 10 more seconds here on the poll.
Sure.
Results are about as expected. I think this is good. It's going to sort of help us shape the conversation today.
Excellent.
3, 2, 1. All righty, and here we are. And of course, the vast majority, which is really good to see for us, is that it's on the roadmap, but they've not started yet. So hopefully this will instill some confidence in actually starting through the process. Got a 4%
Awesome,
who have started, who haven't started the upgrade but not completed. So that we can definitely would be receptive to helping that completion process. See how folks are doing. Curious what the others are. That's a little nebulous, but we can definitely tackle some of that in QA. So
awesome.
Well,
Yeah, no,
get
thanks,
rolling.
Anders. Definitely some great some great insight, and like you said, yeah, definitely not unexpected. All right, so let's jump into the actual architecture section. And so if you're used to VCF, which I think anybody who's deployed 4 or 5 is, we have that management domain. Now, what you can see here that's slightly different than the 5.x is that we have the VCF automations and operations piece sitting on the top of that. And so that's something that is is a little bit different in 9, where we have some constructs that these pieces are part of. If I move on to to click the next, in VCF 5, similar design, where you basically have your additional workload domains, and so you would just add that on to your to your VCF instance. Now, where this changes in 9 is that we now have the construct of a fleet. And so that's where the important structure of the automation and operations piece that I mentioned before comes into play. Is that for a fleet, you would basically have one automation and one operations instance that basically gets used for the entire fleet of stuff. And so that could mean one or more VCF instances, and each of these things would have that common fleet. And so if I click one more time, you can also then have multiple fleets that would have multiple different instances as appropriate. So this is something that the fleet construct is something that is very much kind of new to to the VCF 9 environment, and that's something where I've seen several examples of customers who would basically do them, whether it's via region or via country or whatnot, that allow you to basically really build this this building block of your private cloud that has different footprints and different blocks that you see on the screen. So that's something that I did want to call out, because we're going to be talking through a lot of these constructs as we talk about the upgrade, because obviously once you are upgrading, you have to take into account the fact that you may need to add some of the components, or you may need to upgrade things in a different way based off of based off of what you have deployed, or where you want to go. So that's something that like I said, is new, and I wanted to call that out. The other thing that I also wanted to to call out was the different workload domain and cluster topologies. And so in previous versions of VCF, you should be pretty used to the management domains and consolidated domains. Those really haven't changed. You still have those sort of building blocks. Now, what we have added, and you can see this throughout our documentation, is the idea of the standard cluster, multi-rec cluster, stretch cluster, availability zones, instances, that sort of stuff. You can see in the second part of the slide. But effectively, we now have designs for multi-site. We have designs for your multi-rack configurations, as well as stretching stuff across the different racks and whatnot in your environment. So we've had many a conversation of really like what's the best way of laying out stuff for DR purposes and whatnot. And so that's something where if you take a look, there are now 5 designs that we have in our documentation. We also have a representation of that for our professional services teams, where depending on the level of availability that you need, etc., the different designs will come into play very, very nicely. And so that's something where, again, we like to start from this known good starting point, and we get to a point where we really do know that we are doing the appropriate stuff, and it's been tested and configured properly from from a PS side as well as from an engineering background side. The next kind of piece that I want to talk through is there are many different sort of pathways. And so we're going to talk through what do the pathways look like in an upcoming slide. But effectively, what we want to say is, hey, you now have this new thing called the installer, right? And that allows you to basically create and deploy and configure that fleet, right? So that new concept that we sort of talked about. Now, this also allows us, with the installer, to not only just deploy something brand new like we had with Cloud Builder. It has built-in functionality that allows you to import environments as well. And so it's got all the pre-checks, got all the configurations for that that import process, which we're sort of calling converge, because there's different sort of paths for that. Whether you're basically taking something that is no VMware Cloud Foundation, adding it to it, or importing an existing environment to a pre-existing Cloud Foundation, that is something that allows us very much to to take leverage of these new features and be able to import stuff in an appropriate way. And so with 9, some of the big things are the networking side, where we now support importing NSX, which in previous releases we never actually did import. So it would have been a brand new fresh deployment. So if you saw some of my other sessions, we did walk through how and what does that look like in our upgrade sort of demo. You will be able to show hey, what does it look like to be able to do that import. So that's preview of the future. I mean, that's not going to be a day because we're talking just about upgrades, but effectively that is one of the bigger things to come with 9 is the installer and all the built-in functionality and goodness there. So let's jump into the actual upgrade process here. And so that upgrade process, is really, sort of 3 kind of paths. As I kind of mentioned, there was different pathways. And so this is, we're focusing on this session on scenario 3, but there really are 3 big scenarios here, right? The first scenario is you just do a greenfield deployment. And so there are many reasons you might want to do just greenfield. And so that just use the VCF installer, and we'll just deploy, right from the ground up, all the different components. So there's not really a whole lot of, things you need to do there other than making sure you have appropriate hardware and configuration set up. Again, once you have a VCF deployment in the environment, that means you could potentially use scenario 2 as well, right? And so scenario 2 is where you would converge existing environments, where that is, something that already has VCF or something that you're going to be adding, VCF to, or you could basically take an existing environment and import it to a pre-existing VCF deployment. So that's going to be covered in our next webinar that I will be doing, is right around that converge process. So scenario 2. And then scenario 3 is, again, what we're talking about today, and that really is about the actual upgrade of your existing VCF deployment. So this is something where, we're not going to talk about the converge, but that upgrade process, and how do you say, hey, go from whether it's 4.x or 5.x into a 9.x environment? How can we do that in as quick a fashion as possible? And so that brings us to our next poll. And so our next poll really, Anders, if you could pull it up, is around just a version of VCF that you are currently running. So we're just kind of trying to get an idea here of the versioning, just because there is slightly different steps if we're on some of the older versions where you might actually have to upgrade multiple times to be able to get to a point where you can get to 9.
All right, we're definitely
For consolidated environments, specifically, how many hosts are allowed in the consolidated design?
Nope, you can have the default of 4. You can add other hosts to that, and so you can add more than 4 hosts and cores to that. You can also convert it right from a consolidated design into a standard design by just adding a workload domain. So we don't have any restrictions there. If you do need more things, you can definitely put them to that particular, or just add hosts or add workload domains as appropriate to be able to do that.
Thank you.
all
very
right.
much.
We're going to give this about 10 more seconds here. All righty, I think we're good. Let's take a look at our results. A lot of 5Xs. That's great to see. Couple of 3s. That's going to be interesting. So yeah, definitely want to talk about that. And then of course we've got our folks that are already on the big 9.0. So
that's excellent. Yeah, no. So the 3 ones are probably the most complex of all upgrades, just because the V to T transition there as well. So it's definitely good to to see we have a good base of 5, because that is also something that is important, right? Because to get to 9, you have to first be on some version of 5.x. So that's definitely good to see. All right, so let's jump into readiness for VCF 9 upgrades. And so you can see on the screen we got a couple of different sort of paths. And so this is something where if you are on 3x or 4x, you do have to upgrade that environment to to 5 to be able to get to 9 first. So we do have that minimum requirement for for a VCF. So with 3.x, there could be a lot more considerations, just because you do have to get from NSX V to T. 4.x to 5.x is a very straightforward upgrade, just like 5 to 9 is, where you're going to upgrade each component appropriately. If you're on the earlier versions of 4, then that's something where you might have to do a couple of in-version upgrades, so you get to be able to do a skip version upgrade to to get to a version of 5. So that's something that just keep that in mind with existing installations and deployments. You do have to make sure that you are on an appropriate version before you can can do that upgrade. And then if you are on anything less than vSphere 8, and so if this is something where if you're doing that that converge process, you do have to at least be on vSphere 8, which is equivalent to a VCF 5 environment before you can upgrade. And so this also comes with the the caveats of Aria components and whatnot also need to be upgraded. We'll talk through that in the next slide. But if we're doing some of those pieces, you do you have some minimum versions that you have to be on for the different versions of vSphere, NSX, Aria, etc. A couple other things to note is that VxRail support right at GA was not available for 9, so that's something where we need to figure out some of the details there with Dell to be able to do that, and so that's something you should talk to your Dell reps for any details for that. Then VCD, so VMware Cloud Director, is also something that isn't currently supported, but in the future, I'm hoping that well, it's expected that it will be. So that's something that with 9, we do have to wait for that. So those are some considerations for that upgrade readiness. Just need to make sure that that if you are doing it, we're not going to break anything before you do it. So you might have to postpone some of the upgrade scenario, just depending on some of those pieces as well. So those are, kind of some hot topics that we're still, working through some of the details on, but definitely something that you should take into account when you're, doing an upgrade pre-check of your environment. And so let's jump into, some more details here. And so this is where the upgrade paths become, a little bit more diverged. And so this is, a configuration where you need to make sure that depending on your starting of the environment, your process for upgrading would be a little bit different, right? And so as of 9.x, Aria operations is actually a required component. So that's VCF operations in 9. That is something that is actually deployed by default in a deployment. So if you have a 5.x environment that does not have operations deployed, then that's something where we need to obviously, as a part of our upgrade path, be able to upgrade that to version 9. And so either we upgrade or we're deploying. I mean, we need to basically make sure that that Aria operations piece is there. And so that means you have to make sure that you either update it with the update pack. It has to be updated to 8.18 before the upgrade is allowed. And then if you're also using Aria operations but have the Aria Suite Lifecycle deployed, then that's something where Aria Suite Lifecycle also must be updated to 8.18 patch 2 before we can do that upgrade. So that's the one big thing that is an absolute mandatory is that we make sure our operations is either deployed new or we're updating the existing components for Aria operations. The other kind of Aria components are less mandatory for that core upgrade. However, you do recommend still that we upgrade automation and operations for networks. Those are components that are there, but we do have a caveat here: the fact that if there is a lot of custom coding, for example, in Aria automation, that might be a whole upgrade process in and of itself. So that's not mandatory for the core component upgrade. We do recommend, obviously, but it can be upgraded post core component to 9 upgrade. After you're ready to do that. So again, some of the custom coding can be a bit of a challenge, obviously. And so, we don't want to necessarily stop the upgrade process, but that can be done afterwards. Similar thing for our operations for networks. That is something that must be on 6.13 before you can upgrade to 9. That can also be done post upgrade of the core component. So it all depends on your comfort level and the amount of custom coding and whatnot that are involved that allow you to figure out what the best process would be for that. So that is sort of the first 4 things that you see, 4 or 5 things here on the slide. After that, you just have the upgrade of the core components, and so that is SDDC Manager, that is NSX, vCenter, ESXi. Each of these components, you can upgrade them right from the SDDC Manager consoles. And so this is something obviously that if we're upgrading to 9, we want to, those are mandatory components and have to be done as a part of that sort of upgrade process. From our perspective, it is something where we have to be on that 5.x VCF bomb to be able to do that upgrade at 9. So that is sort of that same process with the ESXi version 9, vCenter version 9, etc. So that is some details on some of the different upgrade paths. And you can see how we have a little bit of complexity built in here, right? Because it is something that, depending on those components, you might need to do, certain other things before upgrade is actually allowed or can be done. So definitely want to, call it out. And so as you're planning, you basically are going to figure out what components are in there and, what components need to be upgraded as a part of the track or the path that you're doing. Okay, so now let's jump into some of the prerequisites for upgrades. And so this is just for the core components. And so you can see there are many kind of core upgrades. We have some KB articles in the release notes that you should probably follow. And I know myself, I'm terrible at looking at the release notes. So I'll always run into issues and I'll look at the release, so I'll see that I should have done something. So I still have to call it out, but yeah, definitely make sure you're reviewing those releases because they have some great information on some of the common things that people have seen and things that you can do to prevent. Other things you need to make sure of for the VCF 5 to 9 upgrade is that we do a reduced downtime upgrade for vCenter, and so that means we have to have a reduced downtime upgrade done. And so that's because major versions of vCenter require that sort of reduced downtime upgrade. And so we just need to make sure that we have those IP addresses available to be able to do that. Other basic things that are there. So you have to make sure that, for example, hardware, that needs to be done pretty pretty conclusively. There might be some differences that may not let you upgrade for that particular version. So that's something that again, many different things. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it is something that you do need to take into account some of these very core things before the upgrade can be able to be used and processed. Okay, so upgrade planning. So I always love the upgrade planning piece because in the past it was something where although it was a part of the BOM, we didn't have any sort of wizard for that. So this screenshot, you can see, here's how you would do the upgrade, right? You click the plan, you can basically customize the upgrade if there's different versions you want to go to. For example, if ESX or is a security update, for example, that's something where it will dramatically help for you to be able to, do the actual customization of that to make sure you're on an appropriate build. So we'll walk through that in one of our subsequent sections. But that's what I want to sort of talk about for that upgrade planning kind of piece, is that we do have that all built in, whether it's for the patching complete for a VCF version, or it's just to add a patch, right? So that's something where we do have that ability right built into some of the later versions of 5.2, but also really built into 9. So that's something that I've appreciated as I've been working through some of these configurations as well. Okay, so let's jump into our actual demo videos and content. So just to give an overview, my environment is just a pure 5.2 environment. I didn't have any Aria components installed, so we're going to walk through some of the tips and tricks from PS for how you can turn on and get the Aria operations stuff deployed. But basically, we're going to be going through this environment, and upgrading each of the pieces based off of the components that are there. And so we're starting off with, like I said, that fresh 5.2. 5.2.1 environment, I think it was, or maybe 5.2, but effectively upgrading that environment to basically get you to to that 9 environment, and then we'll add the operations pieces as appropriate. So all of this, you can find a lot of details in our documentation. So I won't jump too much into that that piece there, but it is something that allows us to to really get a handle on how this upgrade would progress. So this first screen, we're going to show the demo in just a second, but this first screen is what it would look like when you're going to just say, hey, I want to upgrade SDDC Manager. So I go into VCF 5.2's SDDC Manager. And when I go to my SDDC Manager page, as long as you have your depot configured, you will see, this screen here, where effectively you see the new versions. And so I could have upgraded to 5.2.1.2, or I could have just go to 9. So in this case, I'm going to go to 9. And so what I did was I basically made sure my binaries were available, and then I just clicked the download button. And so that allowed me just to, to run through that download of the actual components before we start the actual configuration. So I'm not going to spend more time on just slides. So let's jump right into our demo. And so the first thing I always do is I run our actual pre-checks of the software. And so it takes a few minutes here. So we've set up some of the the progress bars here, but effectively I'm going to run that pre-check, make sure that my configuration for SDDC Manager is appropriately configured. And so once we actually get the the pre-check results back, you'll see hey, in this case I had no errors, and I had a warning and many passes of the configuration. So if I go in, I could take a look at what are my actual warnings. And so in this case, my error is around the depot credentials. And so that depot credentials, I have an offline depot configured, so therefore I didn't have credentials configured, and so that is expected. So I'm not worried in this particular case. So once I'm satisfied my pre-check is done, I can now go and I can click the Update Now button. So that Update Now button will basically allow us to start that VCF upgrade. So this should look pretty familiar if you've been on VCF for a while. The VCF upgrade is very much the same, and so you'll run into the actual update status once it actually triggers that, and it's going to go through and it will upgrade each of the different pieces as appropriate, and then restart the VM. And so I'll just open this up here, and you can see effectively the different steps that it will take to to do that upgrade. And so once it's done, it's going to restart the appliance, obviously, and that appliance will allow us to log into the new version once it's done. And so in this case, it refreshed, and we now see the actual updated console and appliance for that particular configuration. So you can see the upgrade was successful, and we can go through. I'll just close those error messages, and we can see the progress of that particular upgrade right in the console. And so I'll go into my SDDC Manager window, And you can see that my SDDC Manager version is on 9.0.0.24, blah, blah, blah. And that allows us to, make sure that was, successful. I don't have our manifest here because I haven't connected my depot yet, but effectively, we're good to go there. And so I'm going to go down and, configure those depot now. And so I'll go into my offline depot and I'm going to set that up. And I'll just enter my configuration here. And once that's done, I'll be able to see, the different binaries that will be available for this particular configuration. And so, yep, it's configured. I'm going to go to our release versions and you can see the different pieces. And then once you go into binary management, you'll be able to see each of the different binaries that are available for this particular configuration. And so the binaries, there's upgrade, patch, and install. And so depending on what you're upgrading or doing, you'll have to download the different patches as appropriate. So in this case, I'm going to download ESX because it's pretty quick, and you will then schedule the other things to download. But we're not going to sit here and obviously wait for them. And so in this case, we'll do vCenter and NSX. And once we have that done, we will be good to go to jump to our next step. And so in this particular case, our next step is, once we have all of these done, is to upgrade NSX. And so let's jump into sort of the NSX section. And so with NSX, the beauty of the 9.x release is that the NSX binaries are now installed with ESX. And so therefore, this takes less time to basically do that NSX upgrade. So that's something that is really good. And you can see here in my particular configuration, when you go through, this is sort of what that NSX upgrade process looks like. Now, if you're like me and you're impatient, you can also take a look at the NSX consoles and you can actually see the upgrade go from the NSX upgrade console as well. So that's a tip and trick. I'm not going to show that one in this particular video, but I did in the past. You can always take a look at the the different interfaces to watch the upgrade occur rather than just watch this particular screen. You'll see a more detailed status of that upgrade. And so for this particular configuration, let's jump into the video of what does that look like. And so in this case, you can see I've finally downloaded all my components. And so as a configuration of that, we can now go into our workload domain and we can go to our updates tab. And you can see we have no upgrade plan. And so our upgrade plan, once we select that, will allow you to select a VCF version, and it's going to let us configure each of the different components of that if you click that customize upgrade button. Now, in this case, there are no other versions that are available when I did the video for this. And so, if I would customize upgrade, you wouldn't be able to change anything. But in future, once there are several patches and stuff out, you'll be able to customize that appropriately and then click confirm. And so then you will basically see the upgrade path for the the summary. And you can see this is the process or the path that we're going to be taking. So once you click done, you can now see that we will have a path available, and you'll be able to see, hey, we have 1 of 4 steps done because we've already updated SDDC Manager in this particular case. And so that is something where it's a newer feature, but it allows us to do a lot of good stuff there. And so what we'll also do here is we're just going to run a pre-check as well, just to make sure that that we're good to go for each of the components. And I always love to do the pre-checks. It does detect quite a few things that could potentially go wrong as well. Now, so in this case, I'm going to speed up the pre-check here. It does take a little bit of time to run, but effectively, once we're done, we'll see something similar to what we saw when we upgraded and did that pre-check for SDDC Manager. And so in our case here, we have a couple of warnings, no errors, which is good. And so if we take a look again, we can see what our warnings are for NSX. And so I'll click over to my warnings. And it looks like just a couple of warnings about just depreciated objects, etc. So there's nothing that's too crazy here. We also don't have operations deployed, so there's no version there, which is obviously expected. So there's nothing that's of concern there. And so once that pre-check is done, we can now click the schedule update button, and we'll be able to schedule our upgrade of NSX. And so this is something that takes a few minutes to to obviously get started and to to run through. But effectively, what will happen is it will go through and it's going to upgrade each of the components of NSX to be able to make sure that we have everything on that 9.0 version. And again, the beauty of this is we don't actually have to update the host clusters because it's installed with the NSX binary. So effectively, we're just doing the upgrade coordinator and then our management cluster. So it takes usually a little bit less time to basically do the NSX upgrade in this particular case. I've not seen any major errors in the several times that I have done NSX upgrade, so that's great. There are a few things that will be detected, and as long as you're going through that pre-check, you should be able to correct them without too many errors actually occurring. And so in my case, it's a virtualized lab, and so it took about 3 hours and 25 minutes for that upgrade to go through fully. So that's something that once we are done there and you get a success, you can exit that. If there are any errors, you'll be able to do a retry from there as well. But we can now see that we're on to our next step of our upgrade process, which in our case will be vCenter server. And so that'll be our next configuration. Our next demo is showing, hey, well, what does it look like to do that upgrade of vCenter server? So let's jump into some brief vCenter details. So with in-place upgrades, you can't do that between versions of, or major versions, I should say, of vCenter. And so that's where I mentioned earlier where we do have to do that reduced downtime upgrade. And so once you're in version 9, you'll be able to do the the in-place upgrade of the appliance as well. So you do not have to do the the reduced downtime upgrade. So that is something that, regardless of whether VCF or SDDC Manager is being used, that is intra-version vCenter requirement. And so this is what the upgrade for vCenter looks like. Very much similar. This one looks like it only took me about 2 hours to do. So that's something where, just sort of a bit of a timeline on slower environment. So let's actually jump into the actual demo of what that looks like. And so in this particular case, this is our video of upgrading vCenter. And so in my configuration, it wasn't anything crazy. And so you just have to go in. You can take a look at the details for what you're actually upgrading to, so you can see the versions. And then basically you can click the schedule update or reconfigure update button here as we go. And so you can see it is that reduced downtime upgrade. So you will need to have that IP address. There are 2 options on the upgrade to like 901, for example. So that is something that's good, but you do have to have that. You want to make sure you have a backup of vCenter, and then you're going to enter the configuration for the network. And so this is just that temporary IP address that we'll use to deploy and configure the appliance to be able to do that. So we'll enter our IP address and our gateway here, well, the subnet mask, and we'll click next. And then we just have to enter the details for that upgrade schedule. So we're going to schedule it for just an immediate switch over and preparation. And so, yeah, we can review those details, and it will initiate that configuration for the deployment. Again, it looks like like I said, it took about 2 hours for this, the actual upgrade to occur. So that's definitely something to to take into account and to note. So we can see our status here. Something that's not too too incredibly interesting, but it is something that allows you to get an idea of what is actually being done during that upgrade process. So we'll, I think, speed through this video. I think I sped it up so that we don't have to wait for too long to be able to do that. So again, pretty straightforward. You can see our status for that. And once we exit out, we should see we are done 3 or 4 steps, and we'll be able to jump into the ESX upgrade in our next video. So one of the things to note, when we're talking about ESX, is that in 9 we no longer support the baseline functionality for vSphere upgrades. And so that's something that, as a part of our upgrade process, we need to make sure that we convert any clusters that aren't already image-based to images. And so, there is a full KB article, and Brent will be able to post some of the links for being able to do that upgrade in in our chat here. But effectively, that is something that is sort of mandatory. In our demo, I was already on images, and so in the demo, what we do show is hey, well, how do you make sure you have the appropriate image to be able to do that upgrade? So let's jump into the video here, and we can showcase that kind of piece. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our workload domain first. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you don't have an actual image selected. So I'm going to go through, and I'm going to go down to my configuration details for ESX. And once I have the configurations details for NSX or ESX there, I will be able to go in and run that wizard. And so that wizard, like I said, makes, you do have to have, that upgrade image available. And so, there will do a pre-check that'll happen. You can select the cluster. And then if you don't have any image, you'll see that we actually get an error. Oh, we'll get an error in that particular configuration to not allow us to be able to move forward. So let me jump back here, and I'm just going to skip forward because I missed the video here. So you can see, go back. So you can see I don't have any images showing, and so that obviously will prevent us from doing that particular upgrade. And once we are ready, you're going to go into vCenter server, and we're going to basically import that particular image. And so in this particular case, if I go in, I will be able to go into our vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and I could create that image. But before I can create an image, I have to make sure that I have the version of ESX in our software depot. And so I can go into the software depot, and I can import my ESX image. And so that's what I'll do here now, is I'm going to select our image for 9 that we want to use. And I'm going to click that import button to allow us to basically do that import of ESX. And so it'll take a second or two for that to get added to the repository. But once we have that, you're going to be able to go in and you'll be able to configure that appropriately. And so I'll go into my image library now that's there, and I can give it 502.9.x name. And then I'll be able to select that version now that it is available in my list of stuff. And so you can also select your vendor add-ons for the different firmware and drivers, etc. And you'll hit save. And so once that image is there, now we're on the process to basically get that up and running for our upgrade process for ESX. And so in that particular case, now that we have the image, you can go to Image Management in SDDC Manager, and we can import that image directly from that vCenter server. And so you can see our new image here. And we'll click import. It will take a couple of seconds here to go through that import process. But you can watch that in the actual tasks. And once that's done actually running here, it'll take a few minutes to run. You will be able to now go back through that ESX wizard to be able to showcase the actual upgrade of ESX. And so in this one, I'm going to be showing because I'm impatient, what that looks like in the vCenter console, as well as that ESX image is being upgraded. All right. Oh, geez, my video is not happy right now. All right. Let's get for a little bit. Okay, so now you can go into the the wizard again. And so the actual select the cluster, and you notice here on the slide that we don't have that image unavailable section. So we can go in and assign that image that we just imported. And once that's actually done being imported, we can basically, like I said, assign the image to the cluster. And once we go through, we can add a few options, and then we can run that pre-check. And so that pre-check essentially is going to make sure that each of our ESX hosts is appropriately configured for that particular update. Now, in our particular case, because mine is a nested environment that I was running this on, we're going to see a few errors. So you get to see what actual error messages would look like for that particular host and for the particular clusters that are involved. And so my case is going to be an error message here that talks about the SCSI driver not being supported. So that's something that in my environment, it is expected that we would see that, but it is something that you just have to note that you do need to make sure that any of the hardware errors, in most cases, need to be upgraded and fixed before you proceed forward. And so you can see we have a few warnings, few errors. If I pick one of the hosts here, you can see what that error looks like. Again, like I said, it'll be the SCSI error. That it's a PV SCSI. It's something that because it's nested, for my environment that's okay. For others, we recommend looking into that. You can also see any sort of warnings such as this one here where you'll have to do a reboot of the host during that upgrade. So again, you have to be able to plan appropriately, and so that's where the pre-check does an amazing job. And from there, yeah, we can go in and we can schedule that upgrade, and so you can see that our versions are there. We're gonna select upgrade now, and we'll make sure that hey, we're done the hardware compat stuff to be able to sort of do it. And once that's done, you'll be able to see the actual upgrade process start, and you can see the screenshot that I had in the previous slide, and that will allow us to monitor this. But again, it's something that, like I said, if you're impatient like me, you never just want to sit here and necessarily wait. You want to see what the status of that actually looks like. And so in this case, this is where I'll show, if I go over to the vSphere client, I can go in and actually show what that looks like from the console. So if I go back into my inventory, you can go over to the cluster and then hit the upgrades tab, and you'll be able to watch the entire upgrade of ESX happen right from this particular console window. And so that's something that, like I said, because I'm impatient, I like to just watch things happening and see if there are any errors and whatnot happen. So I'll speed this up here. You don't need to spend a whole lot of time sitting here and looking at some progress bars, but it is something that is kind of interesting as you're going through the upgrade. And like I said, I always do this. You will be able to see what those configuration pieces look like. And so you can see we have 4 hosts that are not compliant, and then as soon as it kicks off the upgrade, you'll be able to see the actual progress of those pieces. So I'm just going to speed through it. So you'll be able to see the actual remediation piece happen, and you'll go through there. So each host will be rebooted, the patch will be applied and whatnot. And from that perspective, it's I only have 4 hosts here, but it is something that will allow us to sort of watch that progress. And you'll see that took about 29 minutes for those 4 hosts, and that's my upgrade process for that particular ESX. You can see if there are any warnings. And so in this particular case, because I didn't have the depot configured, we got a few compatibility warnings, but there's nothing to worry about from that perspective. And so that is our upgrade of the ESX. And once that's complete, you can see we're actually on the workload domain version 9, and you can see we have all those core components completed. Now in my environment, because I didn't have any of the Aria components installed, we just need to make sure that we add the VCF operations components to that. And so as a part of the upgrade process, depending on those components, that's where you may or may not need to do upgrades of Aria before you would do the core components. Or like for me, I'm going to just deploy the Aria components right from my SDDC Manager client.
Hey, Jonathan, let me stop you. There's a common theme of
Sure.
the question. It has to do with the relationship of SDDC Manager and Ops. Can you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, so within VCF 9, Ops is a built-in component. So SDDC Manager is, at some point going to be fully into VCF operations. And so right now, it is there. You can still use it. The interface it shows as depreciated, so it's going to be something that will be removed in the future. However, once you are fully on 9, all the functions that you used to do in SDDC Manager are now going to fully be available in VCF operations. So that's definitely something you have to be aware of, is that everything from licensing to certificate management to password management is all done from within that VCF operations console now, even though that SDDC Manager console is still there for the time being. So this is why it's so important, obviously, that we make sure that to complete our installation, we need to have VCF 9 operations deployed. And so there are 2 basic ways to do it. And so if you go into the documentation, you'll see both of these kind of ways. And so the manual deployment of appliances, you can see the in the first screenshot there, you can just deploy them. You have to configure them, and you have to then attach them to to your SDDC Manager. The way that PS and the way that I personally do most of these upgrades is to actually use the API to do it, because what it does is it actually runs the same functions that are called when you're actually deploying a greenfield deployment of operations. So that's what I'm going to show, because I feel like manual deployment of appliances isn't really exciting, but from the API call, it's something that we can automate this and make it a lot quicker to to do this configuration. So let's jump into that, because basically I think that is something that's kind of a tip and trick of how PS oftentimes does these upgrades, is to make it as quick and as efficient as possible. So in this case, let's jump into our video where we're just going to go into our developer center and run the API to basically deploy these appliances in an automated way. And so I'm going to go down to our manager component sub node and basically run a post command that will allow us to just basically give a JSON version of our API to basically deploy these appliances. And so if I go in here, you can see that I have my JSON already filled out. You can see that we have our all the details of our operation specifications, as well as our collector specifications, as well as fleet management. So I'm going to deploy those components right from here. You can run, or you can get the full JSON, because you can deploy other components here as well, right from the body here where you see the manager components. And I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to execute this operation. And so you can not show this again if you want, and just hit continue. And what you'll see is it's going to kick off a task that is in SDDC Manager that will run through not only the validation of that JSON and components, but actually go through and deploy each of the different components that we need for the operations binaries. And so in this particular case, it's going to do that validation, and then it's going to start the deployment of the VCF operations fleet management construct. And so fleet management used to be VRS LCM, so the lifecycle manager for VRS components. And so that is something where it's been renamed to fleet management. And you can see that as I ran through that, we get the deployment of the fleet appliance going. So that way we can do the deployment of not only ops, but all the other VCF operations and VCF automation components that are needed for that. And so you can go back over to SDDC Manager here, as you can see, and do a refresh, and you can see the progress of that deployment. But again, because like I said, I'm impatient, I like to basically go and watch it actually go once I see movement in the actual fleet. And so I think we should be pretty close to having fleet management done. And yep, looks like it finished. And so it's going to deploy the binaries and going to deploy operations. So you can see that I'll speed up this video, obviously, but it will go through and deploy all of the operations appliances and then the collector appliance as well. So that's really simple, easy way to not only deploy the appliances, but make sure they all get actively configured in ops, so you don't have to run the the connection process. I mean, not that's hard, but I mean, I like having stuff automated as much as anybody else. And so once this full configuration is done, you will see that we will get a success in this particular case. And yeah, it looks like we're good. And we can then go in and we can go in and take a look at our new operations instance. And so I'll do that here in a second. Just open it up to the the web page for ops, and we can see how it's been deployed, and we can see all the configuration of the VCF console or VCF instance in this particular console. So you can see my inventory if I click there. The inventory will have my VCF instance as well as the vCenters there, so it's something that's all configured. You can see that you have access to the fleet management's in there as well, and then licensing as well. So I'm not sure why my browser is doing that, but once we have that completely deployed, operations is like I said, a core construct where you have to do everything from licensing and your configuration of certificates and whatnot. That's where we have pretty good detail for what VCF requires and is needed. And so once you have all those pieces, you're officially on VCF 9. You can then do the the other post deployment tasks. And so that could mean something like you deploy or upgrade some of the additional components. So that's automation, that's operation for networks logs. The identity broker is another amazing piece that is there as well. It's something that provides SSO to all the components. So it's one of the first things I always configure in my lab. Other things to upgrade are distributed switch versions, vSAN on-disk versions. So these are things that they're not required to upgrade, but it is recommended, so you can get access to many of the new features. Oftentimes, if you're doing an import, as an example, you will need to make sure that the switch is upgraded appropriately. Third-party components is another thing that we recommend you taking a look at and upgrading. It's definitely something that you have great level of detail or change that may need to happen based off of the components that you do have available. And then finally, we had mentioned imports and upgrades, which we're going to talk about the next time I present on a webinar. But to basically make sure you have those things imported. it's really quick and easy, right? With the VCF installer and with VCF operations, you can actually run through the wizards really quickly and really easily for the the workload domains. So it is something that I highly recommend to get everything moving up to 9, be able to use the functionality of SDDC Manager that we run through some of those pieces. So that's kind of the upgrade process for VCF 9. And so I think we'll stop off here with our last poll of the day. And so that poll basically is when are you planning on upgrading to VCF? So Anders, we can throw that. Brent,
right.
while we're waiting, is there anything else that you wanted to throw from a question perspective?
So, Ian Gallagher has a really important one, and I'm going to read it word for word. Okay. Is there a regression rollback path if an upgrade to 9.0 goes wrong partway through? His context is, if my maintenance window is expiring, how do I restore service even if it's back on 5.2? What does it look like when this goes wrong, and how do we help people recover from it?
So complex question, but
Yes.
effectively, it depends on where you are in the upgrade process, right? And so if you're just starting, like for example, SDDC Manager, right, we can always roll back your SDDC Manager to the previous version, because obviously we're going to have backups taken before that, and we can get up and running there. Now, if we've already upgraded SDDC Manager is good to go, then that's something where generally, I mean, if you have started a task, you're going to have to complete that. But if there's a failure, you can't get there, then yeah, you're going to have to be able to, you can roll back the versions of each of these pieces. So it depends on where you are, what the rollback procedure would be. But the beauty is that each of these things is an independent step, right? So it's something where you can make sure that, even though you might not have finished an upgrade, it's something that you can run each of the steps independently, which helps.
Excellent answer to a complex question.
Indeed.
So Anders, what do we got here?
Yeah, it looks like we've got our answers here. Pretty much tracks about where I would expect. So it's good to see we've got a lot of folks who are already rolling or planning on going within the next quarter. Most folks are planning on going within the next 6 months. Good to see. I see, the folks who are not planning an upgrade at this time, I think one of the things that we would be curious about in that is if that's an interest issue, a logistical issue, or a financial issue. Obviously we would be interested to see why that upgrade is not compelling, but looking pretty good here across the board, though.
Excellent. Well, good to see and good to know.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, Brent, I'm going to pass it to you so that we can go through some of the questions and answers for this particular config. You're muted, by the way, Brent.
Thank you very much. You've all kept me very busy on the questions. Thank you very much. Glad to answer them as I could, and glad to have Jonathan jump in on a few of these. So let's see here. Can you touch upon the VIDB deployment and a multi-site solution?
So the identity broker is something that's configured per instance of VCF. So you can either attach that to an existing one, or you can deploy one per site. That's what I've done previously. It's something that I think it depends on your availability requirements. In most cases, for my configurations, I've always done one IDB instance per a VCF instance. So that way you can make sure that your identity broker is always going to be available, regardless of network connectivity between sites, for example.
I'm gonna give you an easy one. You've had some tough questions there. I'm coming up with it. I think people might have this question. Does a 5.2 license work for a 9.0 environment?
So no, there are separate licenses. And so if you're running 5.2, what'll happen is you are using perpetual key typically. So that's something where they will be imported into the environment for VCF 9. But that's something where with VCF 9 we have only subscription-based licenses. And so that's why it's so important to have ops deployed, because that's where all the licenses and all that stuff happens. And so when you have 9, you need to basically have that deployed. You go into the licenses, you connect it into the to the Broadcom portal, and then you'll be able to assign licenses for 9 to your components, and it'll do all the reporting and all that right from right from the VCF Ops instance. So yeah, it is. They're definitely completely separate licenses. As with most of our major versions, there's a separate license. But yeah, the functionality to actually license, is direct from Ops now. So you need to make sure that that is installed and available, and then the licenses can be assigned appropriately.
We all know that Oracle licensing can be a little finicky. So good question from Joseph. I'll read it. Can you have a single node cluster in VCF 9? We need this due to Oracle licensing.
Single
licensing.
node. Yeah. So I'm not sure about single node. I think you have to have at least 2 nodes in the in a workload domain cluster. But we could definitely validate that, Brent. We're going to be posting any questions that have come in. We're going to be posting them as a blog here in a bit. I will validate the response for that one.
Yeah, it comes down to redundancy. Like what's your level of redundancy? Is the extra Oracle licensing for the at least one more host, does that outweigh the cost of having a service go down? So that's really a business decision. And I think
it is. And I'm pretty sure it's 2 nodes that you had, like, for a cluster. I don't think you can have less than 2 nodes in the cluster, but we can validate that, and we'll make sure we get that one answered in our follow-up blog that will have all the questions that were asked and the answers to them in there.
All right, let's see here. Daniel had a good question. Is it obligatory to use NSX VCP in VCF 9 centralized design? And the example is using NSX Edge. So basically, I'll summarize for you. What's the role of a VCP in 9?
VCP? I'm never remember the acronym.
Networking.
VPC. Yeah. Virtual Private Cloud. Yeah. VPC networking. Yeah. So you don't have to use VPCs. You could still use regular edges, and you can actually do edgeless as well in 9 NSX. So we have multiple different ways you can configure the NSX, your configuration, all depending on the needs and the features you have to have for whatever it is you're deploying on top of it.
Good question. NSX upgrade, does it happen in parallel or serially?
It is serial for the configurations. Since we don't have to do hosts, I mean, it's actually, does the upgrade coordinator, and then it does the edges, and then it does the managers. So that's the way that does, but it does it sequentially. It doesn't do them all at the same time.
Okay, excellent. Let's see here. See, are there any special attention needed in a VCF 9 upgrade process when NSX is shared? I'm guessing this is shared across different VCF clusters. Maybe they not enough context. So if you can
workload domains, I mean, there's not a crazy amount to do on that. You do need to make sure that you're upgrading your workload domains as appropriate, though, right? They should all be on the appropriate 9 version.
All right.
So no special considerations there. I mean, instance is the instance. But yeah, you do have to make sure that all the other components for each of them is upgraded.
A good upgrade question reference to VCF Ops. For VCF Ops, do we need to download the binaries, and where should they be placed? I think you touched on this, but you want to touch on it again?
Yeah, so in VCF 9, there are 2 spots for the binaries, right? One of them is your SDDC Manager instance, i.e., if you're going in and selecting the lifecycle piece. The other piece is for the operations piece, so the fleet management piece. And so when you go into the fleet management section, you can go in and you would download the binaries for each of the Aria components, the operations and automation components from that interface, which it downloads them to SDDC Manager or Fleet Manager, depending on the interface that you're in. And so different interfaces, but effectively the same download mechanism.
Okay. John has been very patient. He asked the question early on concerning VCF 5.x vSAN OSA to VCF 9 OSA.
Okay. It's just a straightforward upgrade. The ESA upgrade is much more complicated. I don't think that we allow a straight OSA to ESA upgrade still. But yeah, it is something that as long as you're going from 5 to 9, you'll be able to do that upgrade.
So John, I inadvertently sent you a ESA to OSA KB article. It is more complicated. I think Jonathan, you gave you the straight answer. It's a straight upgrade. So thank you. Hope that helps.
From OSA to OSA straight. I mean, yeah, it is something that you just have to upgrade the on disk format afterwards to make sure you get the features. Otherwise, you should be good to go. I mean, mine is always OSA when I'm doing my upgrade. So it's something that that environment that we were on was OSA to OSA. So nothing too crazy there.
Here's a good one that you're not.
I was gonna say, Brent, let's take one or two more, and then we'll promise to answer any of the other ones on on the blog. They'll post in a little bit.
Just this one for our telco folks. Is there, and you and I deal with this often at work, any path for VCD to VCFA migration?
At this point, there is no path yet. That's apparently expected to come within some of the future releases soon. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, with that, Jonathan, I want to thank you for an excellent job. Very knowledgeable. Good to have you on the call.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Brent. And Anders, I guess back over to you to wrap everything up.
Yeah, for sure. And appreciate you guys staying a little extra to answer some Q&A. And I suspect we're probably going to try and get you back again sometime here in the near future. It's really special that you're willing to, share with everybody, particularly a lot of these more granular questions. Always a pleasure to have you. So just as a reminder, the recording of this session will be available on go-vmware.broadcom.com/VCF webinars. There'll be a link in the chat so you can capture the recording of this session for on-demand, as well as on-demand sessions from all of our previous sessions. And a reminder again, next week we have the elevated cyber compliance for VMware Cloud Foundation. There is definitely going to be some Ubuntu canonical content in there for those of you who are interested. So be sure to register for that. Again, link in the chat for the registration for that session coming up next week on Wednesday. And with that, thanks again, gentlemen, thank you so much for staying a little extra to knock out some of that Q&A. Sure appreciate it. And we hope you all have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Anders. Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.